All right, so first off, let's talk about the definition of mass communication. And just so you know, since this isn't the text, this is my best definition that I could think of. All right, a large audience that uses a technological medium for message transmission. All right, the definition of mass communication is always a little bit problematic. All right, because for instance, there's a famous evangelist by the name of Billy Graham. And he travels around the nation, or at least he used to travel around the nation, and give messages. And when he would give those messages, there would be huge audiences that would go and fill stadiums to listen to him and his message. Did it use technological media? Probably. A lot of times these stadiums get full, and they'll actually telecast his message outside to an audience in a parking lot as well. What do we think? Is that public speaking, or is that mass communication?
Mass communication.
Why is it mass communication?
Because most likely they're probably videotaping them and selling the videotapes, or dispersing them. It's not just the person speaking right here and that's it.
Okay. All right. So geography has something to do with that. Let's imagine that he was giving that message and it's only going to go to the people in the stadium and to the people in the parking lot. Is that mass communication?
I think he's traveling and doing it everywhere.
Okay. All right. So if he gives that same message as he's traveling the nation, for instance, what's that one that came out of the Columbine? There's get along in school, don't bully each other.
Oh.
There's a program. Rachel's Promise.
Rachel's Challenge.
Rachel's Challenge, thank you. It travels the nation. It's a similar message. Is that public speaking or is that mass communication?
Mass communication.
Because it's traveling to different locations. Okay, and the lines are blurred. All right, there's no concrete agreement amongst communication scholars of whether that would be public speaking or mass communication. It depends on your definition. All right, so strictly using this definition, it could be mass communication. However, if I'm giving a presentation to 45 people and I use a PA with a microphone and a speaker, I'm also using technology. So it bleeds over into mass communication in that way too. But I would say that probably the clearest reason why we want to see it as mass comm is when that message is being disseminated outside of the original audience. Right? A dissemination of that information to a larger audience than where it was originally presented.
Could I propose
Refinement?
in the word order that this makes it look like the audience is the actor, but clearly they aren't, they're the recipient? How about the process of using a technological medium to transmit a message to a large audience?
I'd be fine with that refinement. Right? So in that, just get the idea that it's going to be a huge audience that's going to be able to come at this, and it's going to use some media. There's something that's known as natural media. Natural media is my body. It's the things God gave you. Right? So your body, your voice, your facial expressions, those kinds of things. And it's called natural media. Technological media is something that's been invented, some form of technology. All right. So some qualities of it. One, mass communication used to strictly be viewed in terms of broadcasting. And broadcasting is when you send out a message to a large audience indiscriminately. All right? And this mode of viewing mass communication made sense. It used to be that we had NBC, ABC, CBS, and then a little bit of a latecomer was PBS to the scene. We had 4 channels. And that same message would go out indiscriminately to the same audience. We are progressively moving to a society where we're much more striated. In our examples, we already had things like MTV that were talked about, Cartoon Network that was talked about, and even Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, which is a distinctly different audience than you'll get on Cartoon Network in the early part of the day, right? So now we're much more striated, and we have 120-something channels. I have DirecTV, and it goes all the way up to 800 channels, right? Some of them are just radio channels, but there's a lot of striation in our media nowadays. So we've moved more towards a narrow casting view of mass communication. That's where you send out a message at a targeted audience. You target your message. This is what you all had to do in your campaigns. You had to move from a broadcasting scenario to a narrow casting scenario. Okay, here's the channel, here's the medium, here's what time, etc., etc. If you're going to make these intentional decisions, that's what narrow casting is. All right. Another huge attribute of mass communication that's changing the way that we look at this actual context of communication is a theory known as convergence. All right, so it used to be when I was a young guy, I'd get really, really excited. I'm pretty sure it was on Thursday nights. I could look forward to B.A. Baracus and Hannibal, etc. on the A-Team. Dun, 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 yeah, where's my show? I better show up at 8 o'clock on Thursday nights, because if I miss that, I'm not going to see what happens to B.A. Baracus, Mr. T played him, that week. All right? So I have to show up on time and get the message. We now are moving much more away from a push form of mass communication, which means the media itself tells you when and where to show up, towards a pull form of media. All right, so now if I miss the A-Team on Thursday nights, what do? I go to Hulu, and I find it there. I go to NBC.com and find it there. I use my BitTorrents to download the programs legally or illegally, whatever the case may be, right?
On demand.
On demand.
iTunes Store.
I'm traveling on a business trip. What do? I break out my iPhone or my laptop, and I watch it when, where, why, and how I want. Okay? So we're moving much more towards a convergence form of mass communication, which is that technology is available in multiple formats, right? So you can watch that on your cell phone, you can watch it on your laptop, you can actually, many of them now will allow you to download things like Netflix, etc., to your televisions at home. So there's all kinds of different forms. Media is converging, and we're finding that there's a bleeding between the lines. Many newspapers in the United States are failing because of convergence. Why am I going to pay for a subscription to the Idaho Statesman when I can actually get that for free by just accessing it online? All right? So convergence. There used to be another view of mass communication, the strong effects model. And the strong effects model basically said this: if you send out the message, the people will believe it. This also made sense when this field was first growing, because it started to grow in the early 50s. What have we just gone through? World War II, and some of the very effective propaganda that was used on the side, particularly of the Germans. Right? So they had a message that went out to the populace, and for the most part, it seemed to be indiscriminately received. Jews are rats! What do we believe? Jews are rats, they're vermin, they must be exterminated. Right? It seemed to be that if I say it, you will believe it. We're moving away from that now. Now a proverb that we use in mass communication, we view things as a limited effects model. Rather than a hypodermic needle model, which they used to use, you simply put the message in the needle and then inject it into your audience and they will believe it.
So you don't think that if Hitler came back, and because he was a really great leader, but you don't think if he came back it wouldn't have the same effect?
I think that communication scholars would look at his communication in a different way. I'm not here to answer that question. I'm here to look at the way that we view communication. Do we see it as it's inevitable that the message will be received? No.
People are much more skeptical and
Perhaps.
critical and
The propaganda is
Perhaps.
still a very widely used
sure.
It certainly is.
technique in militaries and all
Yeah,
that.
certainly is. And there's still a confluence of events that happened in Germany outside of the way that we view things. You know, there was a whole lot of economic things that were happening, cultural things that were happening at that time that made it maybe prone for that kind of communication, which we may be prone to that kind of thing at some time in our future as well. So it's a more complicated question than in the next couple of minutes I can answer. All right? But we now go away from the hypodermic needle model of viewing mass communication to a limited effects model. There's a proverb that we use. Mass communication does not tell us what to think.
Tell us what to think about.
There you go. But it does tell us what to think about. Right? So for instance, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, how many of you were walking around thinking about golf and saying to yourself, Tiger Woods, I wonder how many women he slept with. Was that a burning issue on the forefront of your mind? Probably none of you cared about it whatsoever. Then all the drama comes out about the fact that he's been cheating on his wife, etc., had several mistresses, those kinds of things, perhaps even children that were born out of wedlock of these women. And we do talk about it now. We do gather around the water cooler. What do you think of Tiger Woods? Is he cool? Is he not cool? And we all have an opinion on that now. No, he's a sleazeball, and I'll never watch another tournament that he's going to ever. He's a young guy. He's got a lot of money. He's not doing anything I wouldn't do. We all have our opinions on it now. Okay? So, strong effects to limited effects model. Agenda setting does not tell us what to think, but it does tell us what to think about. Take a second, write that down. Not what to think, does tell us what to think about. Yes?
Just a good example of kind of that, the strong effects, the differences between then and now, is if you ever notice the old commercials back in the 50s and 60s on products, they would be more about like features, advantages, and benefits of products. They would say, this is blah, blah, blah. It has this, it does this for you, blah, blah, blah. And because it does that, you have more time and this and that and blah, blah, blah. In the commercial. Nowadays, it's like, Coke, pow, hot chick.
Right.
It's over, and then you're like, that was a cool commercial.
Right.
It said nothing about the product. It's like, all it is about now is just name recognition. It's not necessarily
about that product.
Yeah, they don't ever tell you the features, advantages, and benefits of the products anymore.
They don't want you to think logically through it many times.
Just want
They
you to
want you
think
to create
about it.
some kind of a emotional connection or have brand recognition for things. Despicable Me is doing that, perhaps. That's what we
Yeah.
do it as. I have no clue what the movie's about, but now you know that there is such a movie as Despicable Me. It did its job.
Yeah.
All right, we're almost done here. Parasocial relationships. This is the other thing about mass communication that we're seeing in an increasing fashion. And that's that people are genuinely connected to fictional characters and products. Right? So some of us are Coke drinkers, some of us are Pepsi drinkers. Very few of us are apathetic on that issue. Most of us have a stance.
'Cause they
Coke
taste
is
so
better than
different.
Pepsi. Pepsi's better than Coke.
Oh, but
We don't go around and have this war. RC Cola is better than Pepsi. No, you're either a Coke drinker or a Pepsi drinker. Nobody chooses RC Cola as their RC Cola. Right? All right, we'll drink it. We don't even really have that aware as our brain anymore. Right? Parasocial relationships. Some of you are still sad that Friends has been canceled. You want to know what's going on with Ross and Rachel. What happens afterwards, right? So we create a connection to these relationships. The Bachelor, etc.
Edward versus Jacob.
Edward versus Jacob. Which way should Belle go, etc. Right? For myself, I'm pretty doggone convinced that when I go to heaven, the very first thing that's going to happen is J.R.R. Tolkien is going to meet me at the gates, and he's going to finish the story on the Ents. I want to know what happens to the Ents. Do the Ents ever find their Ent wives? Do they ever have little Ent babies? I need to know. Tell me, Lord.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well,
Only my peeps, the nerds in the house, know what's happening. All right, so that's parasocial relationships. And that is a very brief overview of mass communication. I am now 3 minutes in debt to you again on time, so appreciate that all. I've learned my lesson. This ends our session.